had children at the camp. In other words, it wasn't that they had some personal reason to do this, but because they were convinced that this was an important idea and fact to do. Camp Ramah, of course, developed out of the fertile brain of Rabbi Ralph Simon of Congregation Rosevik Tzedek, who went to the seminary in New York. He convinced the seminary to undertake this project. He was a great speaker and talker, so I think he was really a person who could achieve that. And with the agreement at that time that the people in Chicago would provide the kemach, that is, they would find the rabbis divided between kemach and Torah, right? Kemach, right, the hard material needs. So they said the people in Chicago would provide the place, the facilities that were needed, and worry about the financial aspects. If the people in New York would provide the program and staff. And so that's and the local rabbis lined up with Ralph Simon and helped to recruit for the camp. Of course, the camp was a national camp and had we were 90 campers, but from all over, right? I don't know about Mayor, but the first time I met Jews who came from Philadelphia and Brooklyn and Minneapolis, you know, Evelyn, Minnesota, Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? It was really unusual for us. My own personal development came as a result of my work in camp. I began to visit schools and synagogues, not only locally, but throughout the Midwest, and gained my own personal understanding of what Jewish life was like around the country, around the Midwest, of course. I also learned and profited a great deal from the people that I dealt with only in our local camp. From the staff of very wonderful people. You have to realize that at the start, I don't believe that there was one local staff member. There was nobody from Chicago, nobody from the Midwest on that staff. It was entirely a staff that came from the East. That was the seminary's agreement that they would provide a staff that was adequate to the task. And it's very interesting that over the years how this developed, right? I mean, into a homegrown staff, right? People who grew up through the camp as starting often as campers, right? And continuing on as counselors. I also was impressed over the years that our people brought other people in. That it was something that they regarded so highly for a preoccupation to do, that they would bring their best friends to come and join us and help to build a strong staff in the camp. Of course, there were the families of the campers who became good friends of ours. I myself had an initiation to certain rabbinic duties. I remember I was called once when a camper in the camp died. I was the first person that his family called, and that was something that was very new and unique for me. Ramah was based upon the experience of people in New York, especially Sylvia Ettenberg, may she long live, and the late Moshe Davis, who were major administrators at the seminary. And they had experience, especially with the Mossad network of Hebrew-speaking camps, and with the Sedgwick, thank you very much, with the Sedgwick camps. Now, both of those, which was a Jewish, let's call it a Jewish, strong Jewish cultural camp. Both of those camps were behemoths. I mean, they were giants of Jewish camping. And it's always been interesting to me that along the way, those camps died. I mean, Camp Ramah continues to flourish, right, in its locations around the country, but those camps, probably because they were not connected institutionally, they were independent. They were not connected to synagogues, to seminaries, yeshivas, anything. They were just independent institutions, and so they did not survive, and we did. I also developed a network of friends from among the Ramah directors in the time, Mayor mentioned that Louis Newman was a director for 3 years. He brought to camp David McGillner and Jerome Abrams, people with whom I became very good friends and from whom I learned a great deal. Over the years, I began to see the world through a Ramah perspective. Right? You know, you think of all the eminent people who went to Camp Ramah, right? But I hasten to say, they're not all, I may be a product of Ramah. You could say that maybe about me, but other people, they weren't products of Ramah. They may have passed through Ramah, but that was something I think to be proud of. Not in our camp, I mean, like most recently, nationally, Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke was the head of the Federal Reserve, was a camper at Camp Ramah in Glen Spey, New York. Right? So that somehow touched my heart. Right?
Ben Shalom.
Ben Sion. I think it's Ben Sion. Yes, I think it's Ben Sion Bernanke. And then, of course, we had many great scholars, Judaica scholars. Moshe Greenberg, who was probably the greatest Bible scholar of the 20th century, was with us for a few years.
Hymnon Ramah.
What?
He wrote Hymnon Ramah.
He wrote, well, right, that's Hymnon Ramah, right? That's a good point that you raised. Moshe, Hymnon Ramah was, which is now, it's the hymnon of all the Ramah camps, was originally the hymnon of Camp Ramah in Wisconsin. And it was one day in that first summer, they announced a contest, right, for somebody to write a hymnon for the camp, right? It escapes me, right? I forgot now who won the contest, right? But it was Moshe Greenberg and probably David Lieber, who was the head counselor the first summer, who put that text that the person prepared into good shape, right? So, but a camper received a prize, right, for it. I think of people, I mean, other Judaic scholars, Bob Chazen, who was the head of Jewish studies at NYU, and Bob Alter at Berkeley, right, who is both a great biblical scholar and his field is comparative literature, but has done much both in the area of Hebrew literature and of the biblical literature. I think of Saul Kripke. I looked up, you know, when I was coming, I looked up in Google Saul Kripke's name, right? And it says there, Saul Kripke is one of the 10 greatest philosophers of the last 200 years, right? Right? He was with us at camp, was a very unusual person, and Seymour Fox was the director during one of Saul's summers, and Seymour, his father, Rabbi Meyer Kripke of Omaha, Nebraska, had told Seymour that Saul only drinks chocolate milk, right? and Seymour saw to it that at every dairy meal, Saul Kripke, right, that's this greatest philosopher, would have chocolate milk drink, right? And it certainly, I don't know if it helped Saul with his great thinking, but it certainly didn't hurt him.
Right. I just want to interrupt for a second. I want to bench, and then if people have to get back to work and people can stay, we have some more time with Burt, but I want to have the benching. So, Yehuda, could you pass out the benches, please? And Burt, please do them on the
While the benches are being passed out, I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Rabbi Cohen. As we move into questions, I also have to comment that the great partnership that was created between the lay leaders and the professionals has been something that he started in his tenure and goes until this day, and has been very important. You know, one of the great compliments we can pay to somebody is if they can find their successor. So Rabbi Cohen obviously did quite a job. I don't know if you realize that he said, who can I find to replace me? So we found somebody, and I'm not really sure if that somebody, I think he did a pretty good job, and he continues to do. So it's really one of the great attributes to find your successors in this work. Not only Rabbi David Soloff, but a member of our executive committee, his son, Yehuda. So with that, who's going to lead us in benching?
And one of the questions that people wrote into us about, I know Art, Elstein wrote, and Steve just reminded me as well, one of the hallmarks of camp is Hebrew language. And you mentioned Bob Alter, and Burt and I were in correspondence earlier in the year when we found a letter that was sent to Bob and Robert in the middle 50s, early 50s. And he then wrote back his own reminiscences of how his experience at Ramah, Wisconsin exposed him and introduced him to the whole world that became his career in terms of Hebrew language and Tanakh. And in the next issue of the Camp Machanenu, you'll see some of that letter shared. So if you could speak a little bit about the how Hebrew got into the camp and what it took to set the parameters for where Hebrew became as a central cultural pillar of the camp.
As I indicated, the people who, Sylvia Ettenberg and Moshe Davis, were very involved in Camp Masad. Camp Masad was this network of Hebrew-speaking camps in Pennsylvania, and the students there were mainly kids from day schools, from yeshivot, who had strong Hebrew background, but they differentiated. Ramah was a place where, there were no Solomon Schechter day schools in those days, and so everybody at Ramah was, you had to be a Hebrew school student in order to come to Camp Ramah. But the amount of Hebrew that the students knew was relatively weak. But that was their principle, that Hebrew was to be the language of the camp. So we came to camp, and they brought a staff of people who were Hebrew speakers, and with the goal of encouraging us to speak Hebrew.
If I could just interrupt for 1 second, and without putting Mort on too much, Mort always tells a story about his one of his first encounters with you. That's not.
David and I went to Columbus, Ohio to raise funds about 1 million years ago. We met with Dr. Joel Gorfinkel, who was a camper and parent of camper, and he tells this story. He was 10 years old, 9 years old, and he was coming to Ramon, Wisconsin for the very first time, and he took the train, and then they took the school bus that went from Conover down the dirt road to camp, and for some reason he forgot to go to the bathroom on the train, and he got to camp and he was in terrible need of going to the men's room. Little 10-year-old kid. And it was dark out, and it was at night. He didn't know where he was, and he asked someone, "Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom?" And they said, "You got to go down by the lake," which is where the men's Hakise was. And he had never been down to the lake. So he just went down, and he was wandering around. He was running around and jumping up and down and looking for the bathroom. And he turns the corner of what was then the Amanut, I guess, and he comes up to this tall staff person, and he says, "Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom?" And this tall staff person says, "Ani lo medaber."
In the first summer, they decided that we used to have what was called a mifkad every day. A mifkad meant that I guess it was at the end of the day before dinner, that the whole camp would come together and we would stand like an army military fashion, and there they would announce the counselors would announce who were the campers who spoke Hebrew all day, right? Right. And
Rabbi Sykes had no idea.
Right.
Special T-shirt.
Well, right. And if you spoke Hebrew for a week, right, you would receive a letter. For the first time, a resh. In the second week, a mem. In the third week, a hey, right? And if you succeeded, if you did that, right, resh mem hey, you would be awarded with a trip to Eagle River. Now, I want you to know, I earned a resh, that was all. And if you want to see my resh, go to the Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia, and it's there in the permanent display.
No one ever got a myth.
Not me.
1 second, Rabbi Sykes introduced a whole new thing for Nikayon. Why don't you explain what you did?
Well, I don't know how it was back in the early summers of the camp, but fewer and fewer of our campers come to camp knowing how to do certain things that we take for granted, like folding their clothes, knowing which end of the broom one uses when you are trying to clean the floors. And after many years of advocating by our Chief Operations Officer, Benji Bierman, we decided to incentivize that which we used to expect one would just do, because that's what you did at home. And so we created a group called Alufei Ha'ashpa, the Aces of Trash, which may be a basketball team, I'm not sure. And one of our own staff people came up with a logo because it's all about the letters in the shirt, Dr. Cohen. And one of our staff people, Chezi Mizrahi, who is our musician in residence, wrote a jingle. And you would have thought that I was giving away $1 million bills that were worth something. Because every Thursday at the Machazet, the play, or whatever all-camp event we had, we would play the jingle, and the kids loved it, and they would start singing and dancing.
600 people.
And then we would announce the winners of the week, because whenever a member of the Hanhala, the senior staff, or one of the Madrichim saw you engaging in keeping the camp clean, you would get your name put in the box, and then they counted them all up, and I would stand and announce them. And in fact, the very last, the Tochnik Preda, the final program, which I think somebody in this room may have named No Smoking, I believe that that person's granddaughter received the final shirt of the summer. And again, you would have thought that I gave her stacks of $1 million in bills.
Now call Avery.
She literally came dancing up to the stage in tears, so joyous that she received one of these shirts. And the byproduct was the camp was clean, and that, in fact, one of the colleagues, one of the Rabbanim in the Twin Cities, right, as camp director, we almost never hear that great things about the Nikayon, the cleanliness of the camp. So when it got back to me that the Dvar Torah, the sermon from one of the rabbis of the Twin Cities after his first visit to camp, was how incredibly impressed he was, not only with the level of Hebrew and with the passion of the campers, but how clean the cabins on the inside and how clean the camp on the outside was, you know, that all the pieces came together. It's not on display at the museum yet, but who knows? Maybe
Offer it.
a lot of people love it.
Offer it.
So the floor is open for some questions.
There is not a